So for somebody who's never heard of Preservation Hall Jazz Band, how would you go about describing it for them?
The Preservation Hall Band grew out of these informal jam sessions that were organized to take place at a gallery in the French Quarter in the 1950s. And out of these jam sessions grew the idea for Preservation Hall, the idea of creating a band of musicians. Many of them in the 1950s and 1960s were the pioneers of New Orleans jazz. They were the pioneers of jazz. You know, there was an amazing idea in the 1950s and 1960s to create a space and community that celebrated, respected, honored this incredible tradition. A tradition which had all but been forgotten by the city where it was born. That's why we are so grateful for that movement, and that's really what it feels like it was. You know, and that's what my parents were a part of when they moved to New Orleans in 1961, got involved with this community of people. And it wasn't just musicians. I mean, it was much more than musicians. It was artists, it was community leaders, it was activists, it was poets and painters, it was people who were fans of New Orleans music.
While researching Ben Jaffe and the Preservation Hall Jazz Band, I found that he had lost many things to Hurricane Katrina, including his upright bass. But in looking past the devastation of a natural disaster such as Hurricane Katrina, Ben Jaffe is able to see the many positives that came out of it.
I couldn't even imagine our life without the experience of Hurricane Katrina. It was something that devastated us physically and emotionally, and at the same time, it's bittersweet when I say this. It was also something that allowed us to breathe fresh life, new life, into a very old tradition. And that's beautiful. It allowed us to own our traditions. And you know what? People saw New Orleans differently after that. And that's important to me is New Orleans portrayed the way that I experienced the city.
From 2011 to 2012, the Preservation Hall Jazz Band celebrated their 50th anniversary. To celebrate, they performed at venues such as the Newport Jazz Festival and the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival. To top it all off, they performed at the Carnegie Hall to a sold-out audience.
That was an incredible experience to celebrate a moment in your history and to celebrate it somewhere that has such an amazing story.
If you ever get down New Orleans way,
and to be there playing jazz at Carnegie Hall, to think that there was a time when jazz wasn't allowed there. Jazz had to knock down a wall to get into Carnegie Hall.
the dead get up and start walking around.
So it was amazing for us to be there. I mean, we got to celebrate that evening with all of our friends, people who musically have influenced us and been important to us. Steve Earle and My Morning Jacket, and I mean, everybody came out for the show to celebrate our birthday, a milestone in our career as a band and as a venue.
And you would too if it happens to
You know, Preservation Hall is a physical place in New Orleans where we play when we're not on the road. Yeah, that was an incredible night.
terrible scare. Rattling bone, creeping around from behind.
Something I admire about the Preservation Hall Jazz Band is that they have been able to stay fresh, popular, and I will even venture as far as saying hip. All of this while staying true to their roots of traditional New Orleans jazz. So I was curious, how does their creative director, Ben Jaffe, go about sustaining that?
You know, that's the constant challenge of what we do. Decade after decade, having it not become a caricature of itself. and you have to be very, very careful. You have to be a conscious artist. There's a time for unconscious creation, but there's also a time contemplating what you do. I don't take anything we do for granted. I'm not comfortable sort of throwing cards up into the air and letting them fall wherever they fall. You have to know your craft. You have to know your art. You have to know your community. You have to understand what it is you are a part of.
On the title track to the latest album, That's It, it's pretty hard to miss the dominant booming tuba. That sound actually comes courtesy of two tuba players playing in unison, Ron L. Johnson and Ben Jaffe. And while Ben Jaffe serves as the creative director of both the Preservation Hall and the Preservation Hall Jazz Band, trumpeter Mark Broad serves as band leader. For me, I was sold on this album after feeling the energy and hearing the raw sound that comes out of having two tuba players lay down the bass line with an exciting trumpet solo on the top. One can learn a lot about New Orleans jazz, and music in general if they are to sit down and talk with somebody who has grown up in New Orleans. Thankfully, I got to do just that and hear Ben Jaffe talk about what New Orleans is to him.
What we have to understand as students of music is New Orleans jazz is unique in many ways. One of the ways that I find it to be most unique is because it is a social music, a music that is played for social events in New Orleans. That quality, that characteristic of music, of jazz, has been lost in most parts of the country. In fact, I don't really know where that naturally occurs anymore. And that's something that's important to understand is you can create jazz dances and you can create events where jazz is performed for a social gathering, but in New Orleans it happens naturally. And when you grow up in New Orleans, regardless of what you do or who you are or what your profession is, you grow up with music and you grow up with this tradition, with parades every Sunday that feature live jazz bands marching down the street. You grow up with Mardi Gras, where there's music being played all over the city. You grow up with Jazz Fest, where you get to hear all styles of music being performed. But at the end of the day, it's a celebration of New Orleans culture, New Orleans rich musical history, and that's part of our mission and philosophy at Preservation Hall is to continue that aspect of our music, to continue the celebration, to continue to allow our music to be experienced in a social way.
Sadly, I couldn't sit and chat all day with him and pick his brain, as he was in the middle of a recording session, but he was able to leave me a cool promo for the station, as well as some life advice for the trombonists out there.
This is Ben Jaffe with the Preservation Hall Jazz Band, and you're listening to Jazz Street. Come on, it's one way.
Nice. All right. That's beautiful. Thank you very much. I love the energy you bring to it, and I hope to be able to emulate in that
good luck to you too, man. We'll talk soon.
All right. You have a good one.
All righty. Hey, what's your instrument?
I am trombonist.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Cool. Don't let it slide. I'm sure you haven't heard that one before.
All righty. Thank you.
Later.
Bye-bye.